iPhone, he knows the guy. Yes, last question.
Hi, Senator. My name is Linds Jakows, and I'm an ACLU voter. I worked on.
For a second. Everywhere I've gone, I see these ACLU voters asking me questions.
There's a lot of us.
The best question. They haven't all been the same question either. Give me your question.
So I worked on the successful transgender non-discrimination bill that passed in June here in New Hampshire. And now there is a bill in the New Hampshire State House that would allow an X gender marker on legal documents for the non-binary community. I'm non-binary. I would love to update my legal documents. Would you join your friend Kirsten Gillibrand in calling for a federal X gender marker?
What pronoun do you prefer?
They.
Okay. So I have a nephew that is as non-binary as well, and they prefer they as well as their pronoun. This is something that affects millions of Americans, and I have to admit to you, because this was one of the ACLU questions I got today, is I'm just not aware of that issue of creating, and Kirsten's one of my best friends. I'm going to ask her about the piece of legislation on the federal level, and I will learn more about it. But going back to what we were talking about before, the things that have been driving me has been the unconscionable levels of violence, bullying, intimidation, and discrimination going against transgender community, non-binary community, and the LGBTQ community in general. This is something I will continue to fight for and stand up for. But the key thing that's exciting me about you and about everybody here is that this state did something in the last 2 years that's just really exciting. And it's not just the blue tsunami that everybody talks about. Let's not talk about it in partisan ways. Let's talk about it in the reality. More people who are not activists got engaged and got involved, which makes our democracy so much more vibrant, and it actually ends up most often allowing us to do progressive advances in things that we all care about. We are at a point now where I have this definition of hope that I learned from a woman on the 5th floor of the projects who taught me you can't have great hope without having great despair. That hope isn't the absence of despair. In fact, the greatest hope you see is when you have the greatest temptations to despair. She taught me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so whether it's the trans community, whether it is college students who are outraged that we can still have massive loopholes to buy weapons, whether it is folks who are senior citizens that come down to Washington, and I see them in the hallways, to lobby to lift the cap on Social Security taxes and allow there to be an increase in Social Security paychecks, and Social Security checks, and not this what their people are talking about doing, which is decreasing them. All of this is happening because people are seeing, in the face of hopelessness, they're taking steps, in the face of despair, they're taking steps of hope. And I want to end with this one understanding. And then I will do, I'm not leaving. So people who didn't get a chance to ask a question, please come up to me and ask the question. But I was tempted to despair about 2 years ago. And then I quickly found that these last 2 years have been 2 of the most hopeful years of my life. And I was tempted to despair because I saw we lost an election. And I'll never forget, in January of 2017, I stood up there on the Capitol steps, and as a new president gave his inaugural speech, and even a part of me was still hoping that the speech would be something like great inaugural addresses of the past, malice towards none, charity towards all. But this president gave a speech with very little charity and a whole lot of malice. In fact, as George Bush was walking out, it said that he turned to Bill Clinton after this president gave his inaugural address and simply turned to Bill Clinton and said, "That was some strange shit."
Direct quote.
Direct quote, yes. That's a presidential quote. I'm allowed to curse if it was a president. And so I was really worried because I'm just counting numbers. I'm like, they told us what they're going to do. They're going to come after environmental regulations that are keeping us safe and our drinking water clean. They're going to come after LGBTQ protections. We know what they're going to do in our Justice Department. They're going to come after our health care. I just started going into a worry and anxiety mode, and I'll never forget, I heard the siren call of despair. And so that night, I went to bed, curled up in a ball, worrying with a headache about what was going to happen in our country. But the next morning, as the one of our great religious texts says, weeping will endure through the night, but joy cometh in the morning. The next morning, I get up to literally millions of women marching all across this country, saying to me, Corey, this is not a time to give up, to curl up, to shut up. It is a time to speak up, to get up, to rise up. We are in this moment where we must choose hope over despair. We must choose love over hate. We must choose unity against the divisions that are tearing apart our country and literally ripping the fabric of this nation. This is that moment where there is reason to despair, but this is a defining moment because we always have a choice to make. Like those marchers on the bridge, like one man on a couch, we have a choice to make. And in our choices, we're never defined in our life by what happens to us. We're defined by how we choose to respond. Will we let people drag us down further into the politics of pitting American against American? Or will we get up and call to our country's consciousness, revive ideals of civic grace, foster a more courageous empathy? Will we be the agents of hope in this country that ensure that this nation does rise? I believe we will. It's why I'm running for president. I believe that we as a nation will rise. Thank you, everybody.